Christy Duffy for Smart Trend News, and I'm speaking with electric utilities analyst Paul Fremont from Jeffries about Allegheny Energy, its pending merger with First Energy, and the overall electric utilities industry. Paul, thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having us.
So first question is, factoring in higher generation rates in Pennsylvania and Maryland, ongoing transmission projects for the company, greater residential usage, can we expect some steady earnings growth moving forward in the coming quarters?
Well, I think a large component of Allegheny's profit comes from sale of wholesale power, and based on the fact that they have existing agreements priced at levels which are above market, our expectation would be that when those favorable contracts roll off, there will be a negative trend in the company's earnings.
And overall, where are your thoughts on where you do see AYE's normalized earnings growth?
Well, I think the primary growth that we would see would come from the transmission business. The company's building a new transmission line that connects from Pennsylvania through Maryland, called the Trail Project. They're also looking for approvals, which have not yet been forthcoming, on a second transmission project that they're doing with American Electric Power called PATH. There should also be some asset and earnings growth at the regulated distribution entities, which are in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, and to some extent Maryland.
Do you see them receiving the approval for that second transmission project?
So far, what we've seen is a delay. It's unclear at this point whether PJM will ultimately put that project back on the fast track. And I think to some extent, the level of economic recovery, the pace of economic recovery may determine the timeline for that project. But as of right now, there seems to be less urgency on the part of PJM.
And what states did that span through, that pending project?
That would extend ultimately from Ohio all the way through to Maryland.
All the way through to Maryland. How would you say the economies are doing in those states?
Well, I think obviously 2009 saw a tremendous drop-off in industrial activity across the country. We're beginning to see signs of industrial recovery in the first quarter numbers. When a lot of companies reported first quarter, they showed very robust increases in industrial demand. If that continues, if that's sustainable, that you could see a return to 2008 levels of demand, at which point in time we would start to require some of the transmission projects that had originally been slated to come into operation.
All right, what are your thoughts on the First Energy deal? Is the merger agreement offer a fair price?
I think everybody's going to argue over what's a fair price. I think they're offering a fairly substantial premium over and above where the stock is trading. I think in order for the deal to work out, probably for both companies, you would need to see an improvement in the wholesale markets. So we've seen a severe drop-off, not only in demand for electricity, but also in gas prices. That has created a fairly depressed forward market for power and gas. Unless that improves, the deal looks less attractive today than when it was announced.
Do you think it will get regulatory approval?
As far as we can tell, we don't see a lot of obstacles or opposition. to the deal. So we'd be surprised if regulatory approvals became difficult.
So how would this merger and the expected outcome of it being successful have on your estimates and your rating of the stock?
We're currently at a hold that I think includes an assumption that the two companies combine. I think initially we were coming up with modest accretion in the first year. We're now a little bit more in the camp of modest dilution in the first year. It'll heavily depend in future years on whether the company is successful in achieving targeted levels of savings, synergies that they've identified. I think on the surface, we're inclined to assume that the company should be able to achieve the synergies that they're targeting.
Do you see more consolidation in the utility sector?
There have been, I guess, a number of recently announced deals. So if we include Alpine's purchase of the Connective assets, EPL's purchase of the Kentucky properties that were put up for sale by E.ON, there does seem to be sort of renewed interest more recently in combinations. So I think that activity could pick up modestly. I don't see a rush for companies to consolidate.
And what's your view on AYE's dividend growth? Do you think that the current dividend yields are attractive?
I think it's somewhat irrelevant, right? Because I think you're more focused on the combined Allegheny First Energy entity,
right,
assuming that the merger happens.
Right.
Given the level of commodity exposure that the two companies have together, I would think the dividend payout would more likely be set as a percent of the regulated earnings stream as a percent of versus the entire company.
All right, Paul. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today and speak about this. You can view this interview and more interviews like it on our website, tradethetrend.com, as well as by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Trade the Trend.